Hello and welcome back to McClaren Performance for an episode today where I want to talk about something that I end up talking about all the time, and probably it is my go-to word, and that is consistency. Like I always talk about on this podcast, on this channel, whatever I'm calling it these days, I always talk about this philosophy of, well, culture, mind, action, result. But in this case, what we're talking about today, just mind, action, result. And with that is a relationship between those three factors. The mind, in terms of how we think and how we feel, that feeds into our actions, the things that we do every second, every day, and that becomes a result. That becomes our reality around us, which in turn, our reality also impacts upon how we think. So in that, it is a feedback loop all the time of those three things. It really is, to me, as simple as that. But we always tend to fall into this idea, and I've talked about this as well before, the idea of free will, the idea that we have our own choices that are free of that feedback loop, where we have this free will, we can do whatever we want, we're not impacted by what's happening around us, and we actually choose what happens in our life. But in reality, our minds and how we think are an extension of the world, and the world is also an extension of us, how we think and feel as well. So really there's this relationship between mentality and reality. And the thing I always talk about with athletes and anyone really is I want that relationship to be one way. I don't want it to be reality to mentality. I want it to be mentality to reality. I don't want the external world around a person, the things that happen to them, to affect so much how they then think and feel. I would rather for them to choose to think and feel in a certain way, and for then that to impact upon the external reality around us. So there's this causality between our thinking and what happens in the external. And I don't mean in terms of telekinetic, I don't mean like Professor X going to turn up and start moving stuff with his mind. I mean that to have consistency in how you think and feel over a long-term period, over a long time, can have an impact on everything else. And there it is, I use that word there, consistency. It only happens through that key one thing. It's why I always mention it all the time. To be consistent in yourself, regardless of what happens around you. And people are swayed so much by what happens around them. I really try and encourage people to just stay in your own thoughts, feelings, and trust that process that you have going on. And that's really why I love psychology, because it is the underlying thing of everything really. Just like the soil of the tree, our thoughts, our emotions, how we choose to see things, they are truly what feed into everything else. They feed into what we choose to do. That's not an instantaneous thing that happens though, but one that, like I said, happens over time. If you look at your life now, whatever position you're in, that has been a product of years of how you think about yourself. I think more so that than anything else. And in that really, I think it's important to understand how much choice you have in the positions that you end up in. I think we have a tendency to think so much that we're swayed by the environment around us and really under the control of other people and other things. But I think there's a lot more that we have control of, a lot more that we have choice over, especially when you look at that in terms of psychology. We have a choice in how we think and feel within the limits, of course, talking about free will. I think that's such a big thing with people, say, in my generation. So much is put into the external in terms of how we are victims of everything else. And with that, we kind of relinquish this control that we actually do have over what happens. And we don't fight so much for the things that we want. And it's the case with so many people. So instead of trying to change ourselves, change how we think, instead we change things around us to make us feel better. So buying things and traveling and getting a new haircut, whatever it is, all these external things to change our internal, but instead it is consistently changing your internal every day, no matter what, and with time changing the world around you. And with that, I think there's so much more happiness to be found within a consistency in a process. More so happiness in that than anything external. I say there's happiness in the process more than there is in the result. And it's a strange dynamic because we work so hard to achieve something because that's the thing that we want. But I think the best way to do it is to work so hard because we know there's so much joy within doing that work, within committing to that process, to being consistent in something. And then the result is just a byproduct of that. It's the same thing in life. It applies to football. It applies to golf. When I see golf and I see 18 holes, it's so similar to me to an entire season in football. Because in golf, you have to make so many shots over 18 holes, just as you have to win so many games within a season. And in golf, it's so easy to have that focus on that result, on that thing that you want, and to be so focused on it, to when you lose sight of it, when you make a mistake, when you have a bad shot, everything goes out the window because you're so focused on winning, on the result, instead of being focused on your own process and your own consistency in how you think and feel throughout the 18 holes. Just the same as a season. When I look in football, when I'm working with football, say I work with the Newcastle women's football, when I look at them, I'm waiting for them to lose, weirdly enough, because I'm waiting for them I'm waiting to see what they do in response to that, to see if they can actually keep their consistency. And more often than not, and this is the case with every team, every player, everywhere, it's so difficult to keep that consistency. But through that, in the long term, that is where the result comes from. Everybody wants that consistency in result. They want that consistency in the external. They want to win every game. They want to score the best on every hole. But in reality, they shouldn't be focusing on consistency in result. It should be a consistency in mind, in culture, in action. Consistency in yourself, what you absolutely fully control. And then you have the best chance of having that consistency in results. But focusing on the results, it's surface level, and it only goes so far with regards to consistency. Because if that's all you have, like I said, as soon as you lose sight of it, it just all goes. I look at it with Manchester United, and I see at the moment all these rules and changes going around on Twitter, which, by the way, my only little bit of insight, I don't think any of them are actually true. But if they were true, and I'm sure there will be some standards set in place at some point, everyone can set rules, set standards. But can you consistently be that every day? Can you get a group of players to want to consistently be that every day? And to do that, you have to look at their own motivations, how they're thinking and feeling, and really tap into that. We always talk about values and setting values, and that is a large part of that. Having shared values that everybody wants to fight for then brings about that consistency in thought and that consistency in action. And what I mean by that is they will then stick to the rules that are given. So rules are one thing. Everybody wants to enforce rules and standards. We all know what it takes to be the best in terms of the work that has to be put in. But you have to have that consistency in yourself to execute that every day. And then you've got to lose a game. And when you lose the game, you've got to still do the same things and still have the same belief. Be consistent still in your thoughts and actions. I'm really interested in performance in general. And I always read a lot of books about entrepreneurs and people starting businesses. So I've read, say, about Steve Jobs, about Phil Knight at Nike, about Brewdog and Gymshark more recently. And these people that work so hard with no external around them to justify why they should be. Having an idea about something, having the stubbornness, the consistency about them in their own thoughts and their actions for at least 2 to 3 years where on the outside there's no support for it. Those entrepreneurs are a really good example of that process of having consistency in how you think and feel and in your actions, to wake up every day, to want to do it, to believe in it, and to act it out every day as well, regardless, with no external reward for that. But with time, through that process, through building through those small thoughts and ideas, building day in, day out, reward soon comes from that. It just takes a long time and a lot of consistency. I'm at a point now in my life, really, where I'm trying to find out what I want to actually be doing consistently all the time. One of the things I do quite a lot is run 5 kilometers. I run 5 kilometers every other day as a thing that I do consistently, just as a way to practice that. There's no real reward in it other than the actual process in itself, and talking about finding that happiness in that process and finding some peace in that process. I think that running that I do is a really good example of that, because it does make me feel better, although there is no external high with it. I don't win anything at the end of it, but I consistently execute it, and there's a peace kind of within that. The other thing that I consistently do within my process is make these videos, these podcasts, and talk, and at this point trying to do that twice a week. And that's a process in itself where there's not so much external reward from that, but I have a belief and an idea of something in psychology and talking about it and practicing it. And it's up to me now to be consistent in my process of doing it. There's no reward for it right now, but in the future, there may possibly be. But I could easily get distracted by that external. Say I could really want lots of people to watch and listen all the time. You know, I could start talking about Man United, I could make big headlines and do all of those things. But for me, that would really be a focus on the result, less so the process. I want to get better at talking psychology and making it engaging, making it educational. And the only way in which I can do that is to practice that twice a week, make these videos, talk about it, and actually get better within myself at it. Then there will be external reward from that. But to just chase that external, to say in this case, get more people listening, get more people watching, I'm not actually improving, I'm not actually getting better, and any sort of success from that really would just be hollow and short term. So I will consistently stick to this process, no matter what. Say I do anything, if nobody watches it or listens to it, I'm still going to be here anyway. I'm still going to be doing things. I don't like the idea of being controlled or having any external, have any control over what I do. There's an aspect where you've got to listen, and that's important to change what you do, to get better, to learn. But in other ways, it's also important, I think, to stick to what you do and be consistent in it. Be consistent in how you think and feel and in the work that you do, regardless of what gets given to you or what happens around you. And what I guess I mean by that is I would rather be a great person than do great things. So I'd rather consistently be the person I want to be day in, day out, than have these external things that other people care about. And when I say that, those two things aren't separate. The internal, who you are, and the external, the things that happen around you. With that focus, I think, on the internal, on yourself and how you think and feel and the type of person you are and want to be, with time and consistency in that feeds into the external around you, and you get those rewards for that. So yeah, a bit more of a rambly episode this Friday. There's not a lot going on, so there's not a lot of football happening. It'd be interesting to see when the football does start and what there will be to talk about then, but this pre-season period, it is a bit strange. There's only so much to talk about, and sometimes I do want to just ramble about psychology sometimes, and not for it to be about football and everything like that. FPL will start soon though. I do want to set up the league. I'm going to set that up. I'm going to make time for that. I'm pretty sure I know how to do it, so that will happen soon when I get round to it. and that'll be fun. So yeah. Right, everyone have a nice weekend. Thank you for watching, listening, as always, and I will see you again next week.